The cathedral was filled with the scent of roses, their delicate fragrance mingling with the crisp air of early spring. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting vibrant colors across the floor. It was the perfect day, or at least it was supposed to be. As I stood at the altar, my heart was full, my thoughts consumed by nothing but Alexander, the man I was about to marry. He stood across from me, a calm and steady presence, his eyes soft with affection. The guests around us, my family, friends, and loved ones, waited in breathless anticipation. This was the day I had dreamed of for so long, a moment of peace, of love, of certainty. Then, the doors of the cathedral burst open with a force that shook the air, and a piercing scream echoed throughout the hall. "Stop the wedding! He belongs to me!" The words cut through the hushed silence like a blade. All eyes turned toward the source of the disruption. Sophia. She stormed down the aisle, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and desperation. Her dress, bright red, out of place in the sea of white, fluttered around her like a warning flag. My breath caught in my throat. A gasp rippled through the room as guests exchanged confused glances. Sophia had done this before, I knew it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She'd been rehearsing for it since the day Alexander proposed to me. Every attempt she made, every subtle remark, every sideways glance had led to this, her dramatic, desperate entrance into the spotlight. But instead of feeling the dread that I knew she was expecting, instead of crumbling beneath the weight of her accusation, I felt something entirely different: relief. I'd known this moment would come, and I was prepared to expose everything. Sophia stopped before me, her chest rising and falling with the heavy breaths of someone who had just delivered a battle cry. She looked at Alexander, expecting him to swoop in, to reach for her and pull her into a comforting embrace. She waited for the moment where he would turn to me, full of sympathy, hoping I would break. But when his gaze met mine, I didn't look away. Instead, I smiled. It was the kind of smile that said everything without a single word. I had been waiting for this. I reached into my clutch, pulling out a small, folded envelope. Sophia's eyes widened as I held it up for her to see. The letter was thick, neatly folded, and the edges were worn from being handled over and over. I could see the confusion in her expression. She had no idea what was about to happen. "Do you want to know why I wasn't afraid?" I asked, my voice cutting through the tension. "I was waiting for this moment. You see, I've always known you were going to try to ruin this day. What you didn't know is that I've been preparing for it." Sophia opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was caught off guard. The room had fallen completely silent as I unfolded the letter, the weight of the moment settling on everyone. "I know you've been writing about your plans," I continued, my voice steady and calm. "Your every move, every thought, every scheme. It's all right here." The gasps echoed through the cathedral, louder than Sophia's outburst had ever been. I began to read aloud, taking my time, savoring the look on her face as I revealed her deepest, darkest thoughts. I didn't need to say much. The words she had written spoke for themselves. The letter detailed everything: the jealousy, the obsession, the manipulations, and the plan to stop this wedding at any cost. I read her words, each sentence more damning than the last. She had written about how she was going to take Alexander from me, how she believed she was the better choice, the one who truly belonged by his side. As I read her final entry, the one where she confessed her intentions to ruin everything for me, the color drained from her face. She had thought she was so clever, that her secrets were safe, hidden in pages that no one would ever see. Sophia stood frozen, her hands trembling at her sides. Her carefully crafted mask of innocence had shattered, exposing the truth for all to see. There was no more pretending. The woman she had been hiding was now on full display, laid bare before everyone who had ever known her. Alexander, who had been silently watching the scene unfold, turned to me. His eyes were wide with shock, but there was no doubt in them, no hesitation. He knew now what I had known all along. I didn't have to say anything more. The truth had been revealed, and the story had already been written. The wedding, once threatened, continued without interruption. Sophia, unable to bear the weight of the truth being exposed, turned and fled, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor as she disappeared into the distance. I stood there, the letter still in my hand, my smile now replaced with a sense of quiet triumph. It had been a long time coming, but this moment, this very moment, was the culmination of everything. The wedding ceremony resumed. Alexander's hand, warm and steady in mine, was the only thing that mattered now. The rest was just noise, background to our new beginning. Growing up with Sophia Blake was never easy. In fact, it was more like a lesson in survival than anything else. Our worlds collided when my mother, Diana, married her father, Robert. At first, I tried to be patient, to be the good daughter, the kind stepsister, hoping that things would work out. But Sophia had different plans, and those plans never included sharing anything. It started small, subtle things that seemed so insignificant at the time, I could almost dismiss them. Sophia would borrow my favorite sweater and return it with a stain that was accidentally caused. Or there would be whispered rumors about me at school, rumors that Sophia somehow just happened to spread. It was always under the surface, but I felt the sharp edge of her actions long before I realized the depth of her jealousy. She was the master of subtle sabotage, the kind that you could never prove but always felt. And it didn't take long before the small things turned into something far more deliberate, something far more cruel. By the time we were in college, I could see the full extent of her obsession. She wasn't just trying to ruin my things anymore. She was after my life, my friends, my relationships. It became a pattern. She'd wait until I was deeply involved with someone, and just when I thought things were solid, she would swoop in, as if by some twisted instinct, with her perfect little damsel in distress act. She wasn't helpless, not at all. But her act was flawless, and I could see how easily it fooled the people around us. "Eve," she would say with that innocent smile, the one that looked so genuine, so harmless. "It just happened. You can't blame love, can you?" Each time, I smiled through gritted teeth, told myself it would pass, and moved on. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about boys. It was about something much bigger. It was about control. She wanted everything I had, even if it meant breaking me to get it. It wasn't just about taking a boyfriend or a sweater. It was about erasing me from the picture. But then everything shifted the night I met Alexander Winchester at the Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala. The night I'd been preparing for with my company's exhibition felt like a dream come true. But as soon as I laid eyes on him, it was clear there was a connection between us that neither of us had expected. We talked for hours about the future of education, about creating opportunities for those who needed them most. We shared a vision that felt aligned in a way I hadn't experienced before. And as the night drew to a close, it was easy to see that this wasn't just a fleeting connection. It was something real, something that neither of us could ignore. Sophia, on the other hand, was nowhere to be found. She'd been invited to the gala but conveniently called in sick at the last minute. Little did she know that one missed opportunity would cost her dearly. The first diary appeared 3 months later, and with it, a revelation that sent shivers down my spine. I had gone to my mother's house for spring cleaning, and it was there, tucked behind Sophia's old vanity, that I found the black leather journal. It wasn't just an ordinary diary. As I flipped through its pages, I saw the words she had written about me, about Alexander. Her jealousy was written in every sentence, but it was the hatred that cut deep. "Alex deserves someone who understands his world," Sophia had written. "Eve is just a charity case who got lucky. I've seen the way he looks at me during family dinners. He knows he chose wrong." I stared at those words, feeling the weight of the betrayal settle in my chest. It was like she had been plotting behind the scenes for months, studying every moment we shared, trying to twist them into something that would justify her claims. But I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Not yet. I knew Sophia too well. She thrived on confrontation, on control. What I needed was patience. I needed to watch her unravel. And unravel she did. With each diary entry, I saw more of the twisted version of reality she was creating. Sophia wasn't just jealous. She was obsessed. As much as I wanted to stop her, to expose her lies, I knew better. Let her plan, I told Olivia, my best friend, one afternoon over coffee. Every word she writes is another nail in her own coffin. Olivia, ever the cautious one, urged me to confront Sophia immediately, but I didn't. I knew I had to wait. The wedding preparations became the stage for her next act. As maid of honor, her idea, not mine. She showed up at every fitting, every tasting, and every planning session. She played the supportive sister in public while her diaries painted a different picture. She wrote for hours about how the Vera Wang dress should have been hers, about how she would manage Alexander's family wealth better than I ever could. And the more I showed Alexander the diaries, the more he understood just how far Sophia was willing to go to tear us apart. In the days leading up to the wedding, I could feel her slipping further into her delusion. I knew she was preparing for something big, something dramatic. But by then, I had already decided this would be the final act of her carefully constructed performance. Before I share what happened next, the moment that left an entire room of journalists in stunned silence, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. The night of the Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala had arrived, and with it, the buzz of excitement in the air was almost palpable. It was one of those nights you only get once in a lifetime. The museum gleamed, its towering columns casting long shadows beneath the crisp light of 1,000 chandeliers. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the grand hall as influential figures from all corners of society gathered in their finest attire. For me, it wasn't just another glamorous event. It was an opportunity. I had worked tirelessly to make sure that my company's exhibition would leave a mark on everyone attending. This gala wasn't just about charity. It was about securing my place in the world of business and in Alexander's heart. I had only been there for a few minutes when I saw him across the room. Alexander Winchester. He was the evening's keynote speaker, dressed in a sharp tuxedo that fit him perfectly, exuding an air of confidence that was both captivating and intimidating. Our eyes met briefly, and in that fleeting moment, something clicked. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something deeper, something that drew us together as if our paths had always been meant to cross. He made his way toward me, and we exchanged pleasantries, both of us trying to navigate the sea of social niceties. But as the conversation shifted toward our mutual interest in educational reform, a spark ignited. We spoke of schools, of innovation, of the future, of all the things we believed could change the world. Time seemed to slip away as we found a shared rhythm, the kind of connection that didn't need to be forced. It was easy, natural, as if we had always known each other. But then, as I looked around the room, I realized something that made my stomach churn. Sophia was missing. She had been invited, of course, as part of the extended social circle, but she had never shown up. Not once did she make an appearance to mingle, to subtly slide into the conversation, to insert herself into the spotlight. The thought lingered in the back of my mind, but I pushed it aside. This night wasn't about her. Hours passed, and the evening unfolded like a dream. Alexander and I talked well into the night, so absorbed in each other's company that the world around us seemed to disappear. I couldn't have predicted how quickly our connection would turn into something more, how swiftly I would find myself imagining a future where we worked side by side. But there was still one thing nagging at me, one thing I couldn't shake. Sophia. I had to admit I was curious. There was no doubt in my mind that she had some plan in the works. If she wasn't here tonight, she was scheming somewhere else. But little did I know, I would soon find out exactly what she had been up to. 3 months later, it happened. I was visiting my mother's house, helping with some spring cleaning. The house had an air of nostalgia, the kind that made you feel like you had never really left, like time had stood still. As I sorted through some old boxes in Sophia's former room, something caught my eye. It was a black leather journal, tucked behind the vanity mirror she had left behind when she moved out. I didn't expect to find anything of importance. But as soon as my fingers brushed against the cool leather, something inside me knew it wasn't just an ordinary book. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. At first, the pages seemed innocuous enough. Simple entries about her day-to-day life, her thoughts on fashion, the occasional remark about people we both knew. But as I read on, I could feel the shift. There, among the seemingly mundane passages, were the words that made my heart skip a beat. The entries weren't just about what Sophia had been up to, they were about me. I could almost hear her voice in every line, her jealousy and obsession dripping from the pages like venom. She had written about how she envied my life, how she believed I didn't deserve the things I had, how Alexander didn't belong with me. But it was more than that. It was a twisted narrative, one in which I was merely a stepping stone to her own grand plan. Eve doesn't deserve him, she had written. I've seen the way Alexander looks at me during family dinners. He knows he chose wrong. I'll make him realize it soon enough. I just have to be patient. I froze, my hand gripping the journal tightly. The words on the page felt like a punch to the gut. They were both cruel and calculating, yet beneath them, I could almost feel her desperation, her obsession with taking everything from me. Couldn't believe it. It wasn't just some passing jealousy. It was a long-standing plan. She had been plotting this for months, perhaps even longer. The more I read, the clearer it became. Sophia had been laying the groundwork for something massive, something that would disrupt everything. It was as though she had mapped out a version of her life that was designed to replace mine. Her world, her version of reality, had no room for me. She had convinced herself that she was meant to be with Alexander, and that my happiness was something that needed to be taken away. But there was one entry that made everything click. It was the last one in the journal, the final piece of the puzzle. Tomorrow, she had written, I'll make my move. I'll wear the red dress. He'll never see it coming. I'll make sure all eyes are on me. Eve thinks she's won, but she has no idea what's coming. By this time tomorrow, Alexander will finally be mine. I felt a cold chill run through me as I closed the journal. I had suspected something like this was coming, but seeing it in writing made it all too real. Sophia had planned this all along. She had been waiting for the perfect moment to destroy everything I had worked for, to take away the one thing that mattered most to me, Alexander. But instead of confronting her right away, I did something that surprised even me. I decided to wait. I knew that if I confronted her now, it would only give her the chance to manipulate the situation further. No, I needed to let her dig her own grave. Every word she wrote was another nail in her coffin, and I would wait until the time was right to expose her for who she really was. It wasn't long before the wedding preparations began in earnest. Sophia, ever the actress, was all too happy to take on the role of maid of honor. Her idea, not mine. She attended every fitting, every tasting, every planning session. And all the while, she played the supportive sister in front of our family, while behind closed doors, her diaries revealed the truth. She wasn't there to help me. She was there to take what was mine. I kept Alexander informed of everything. At first, he didn't want to believe it. The Sophia he knew seemed so sweet, so innocent, so caring. But as I showed him the diaries, his expression changed. He began to understand, to see her for who she truly was. Together, we came up with a plan, one that would expose her before she could ruin everything. We let her overhear false details about the wedding, just enough to make her believe she was getting closer to her goal. We watched as she scrambled to adjust her schemes, as she took the bait and dug herself deeper. I knew she would try to make a dramatic entrance, but I was ready. I had prepared for this moment, and nothing was going to stop me from reclaiming my happiness. Before I share how everything unfolded, the moment when Sophia's carefully orchestrated plan was finally exposed, I want to ask all of you to take a moment and connect with me. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for what you love, hit that like button because the best part of this story is still to come. The weeks following my discovery of Sophia's diary were a blur of tension and quiet anticipation. Every glance from her, every word she spoke to me, felt like a game she was playing, a game she thought she was winning. But what she didn't know was that I was watching her just as closely, studying her every move like a chess player waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Sophia's obsession with Alexander had become more apparent with each passing day. It wasn't just that she wanted him. No, it was far deeper than that. It was about possession, about control. She wanted to rewrite the narrative of our lives, to take everything from me, piece by piece, until I was nothing but a distant memory. She wasn't just jealous anymore. She was unraveling. Her role as maid of honor, the one I had reluctantly given her, was the perfect stage for her performance. Publicly, she played the part with an almost unsettling precision. She smiled. She laughed. She helped with the arrangements, making sure everyone saw her as the supportive, loving sister. But behind closed doors, the mask began to slip. It was as though every moment of kindness she showed was a calculated move, a way to make herself seem indispensable, to insert herself deeper into the lives of everyone around us. Every time we discussed wedding details, I could see the jealousy burning in her eyes. It was subtle at first, small comments about the flowers, the decor, the music, but it was there, simmering beneath the surface. I just think that maybe the dress should be more dramatic, something more daring. She had suggested one afternoon, her voice sweet, but with an undertone of something darker. I smiled politely, but I knew exactly what she was doing. She was already planning how to outshine me. I remember the day she insisted on accompanying me to the fitting. As I stood in front of the mirror, the delicate lace of my wedding dress hugging my body, I saw her reflection behind me. Her eyes filled with something unrecognizable. It wasn't admiration. It was envy. The kind of envy that grows into obsession. The kind of envy that consumes you whole, like a fire that starts small but eventually burns everything in its path. She could barely mask the resentment that seeped into her voice as she praised my dress, her words laced with venom. "It's beautiful," she had said, but the way she said it, slow, deliberate, made my skin crawl. Sophia was relentless. The diaries told the truth. Every entry was more revealing than the last, painting a portrait of a woman spiraling further into delusion. In one, she described how she would rescue Alexander from me, how she was sure that he was only with me out of some misguided sense of duty. "He doesn't understand what it means to truly belong in this world," she had written. "I can give him everything he needs. Eve's just a distraction. She doesn't belong with him. I do." I knew she was trying to manipulate me, but what I didn't realize at the time was how far she was willing to go. It wasn't just about taking Alexander away from me. It was about proving to herself that she was better, that she could always have what I had, only on her terms. And that was dangerous. That kind of thinking wasn't just about love. It was about winning. It was about destroying the very foundation of who I was, until all that remained was a pale reflection of her version of me. In the midst of all this, I had a moment of clarity. I realized that I couldn't just let her continue this path. She had become obsessed not just with Alexander, but with me, with everything I had worked for, my success, my relationships, my happiness. None of it was hers. She wanted it all. And in her mind, the only way to achieve that was by tearing me down. Sophia wasn't just playing a role anymore. She had convinced herself that she was the rightful heir to the life I had built. She started talking more about my failures, things that hadn't gone as planned, trying to twist every decision I made into something that proved I wasn't good enough. "Maybe if you didn't always try so hard to be perfect," she once said to me, a sickly sweetness to her tone, "you wouldn't have to pretend to be someone you're not." I knew exactly what she meant. She was planting seeds of doubt in my mind, hoping to make me question myself, my choices, my worth. The deeper I dug into the diaries, the more I saw the cracks in her facade. She wasn't just jealous anymore. She was unraveling, mentally and emotionally. The words she wrote became more erratic, more obsessive. The love she had for Alexander, if you could even call it love, became an obsession that consumed her thoughts completely. One diary entry stood out above all the others, a moment of complete clarity for her. "He belongs to me," she had written. "Eve doesn't understand. I've been waiting for this moment. It's mine. Everything's mine." The desperation in her words was unmistakable. She believed she was entitled to everything I had. She thought she deserved it more than I did. But the truth was, I wasn't going to let her take it. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I had built, everything I had worked so hard for. I had to stay calm, keep my head, and let her continue down the path she had chosen. Every misstep she made, every journal entry that revealed her madness, was another step closer to the end of her plan. Sophia had no idea what she was up against. She thought she was clever, that her manipulation and schemes were fooling everyone. But she couldn't see the bigger picture. She didn't realize that every lie she told, every person she manipulated, was part of her own undoing. I had a plan too, one that would expose her for who she really was, one that would finally make her face the consequences of her actions. But before I could put it into motion, I needed to see how far she would go, how deep her obsession ran, how much of her soul she was willing to sacrifice for the life she thought she deserved. In the meantime, I kept my distance, pretending to be oblivious to her games. I knew that the next move had to be mine, and when the time came, I would take it. But Sophia wasn't finished yet. Her obsession was still growing, and I could feel the storm brewing. It wouldn't be long before everything came to a head. Before I share how Sophia's plan came crashing down, I want to ask you all something. How far would you go to protect the people you love? How far would you go to defend what's yours? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and hit that like button if you believe that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight to keep our peace. Trust me, the best part of this story is still unfolding. The morning of the wedding was everything I had ever dreamed of, and yet nothing could have prepared me for what was about to unfold. The church was breathtakingly beautiful, every inch of it decorated to perfection, the golden light from the stained glass windows dancing across the marble floors. The air was thick with anticipation, and my heart raced with a mix of excitement and nerves. Everything was set, every detail accounted for, every moment planned down to the last second. I was standing at the precipice of my future, with Alexander by my side, ready to begin the next chapter of our lives. But as the final notes of the wedding march played, as I looked around at my family and friends, something in the air shifted. The doors of the cathedral burst open, and the sound of frantic footsteps echoed through the silence. The gasps that followed were almost deafening, as everyone turned to see who had just barged into the ceremony. It was Sophia. She was standing in the doorway, her face flushed with a mixture of fury and something far darker, desperation. Her eyes were wide, manic, and she was wearing the dress she had been planning for months. A bright red gown that screamed for attention. It was impossible to ignore. The moment she entered the room, she owned it. For a split second, I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I could see the shock on everyone's faces. My mother's, my friends, even Alexander's. The look of disbelief was evident in his eyes, as if he couldn't comprehend what was happening. But I didn't flinch. I didn't react. I had been waiting for this. In fact, I had been preparing for this moment since the day I met Alexander. I knew Sophia would make her move, and now that she had, it was time for her to face the consequences. She marched down the aisle, her heels clicking against the marble floor, each step heavy with the weight of her obsession. As she reached the altar, she stopped and turned toward Alexander, locking eyes with him as if daring him to do something. She opened her mouth, her voice rising in a frantic, almost hysterical tone. "Stop the wedding," she screamed. "He belongs to me. You can't do this. You're making a mistake, Alexander. He's mine. I've always been the one for him. Don't you see? You're making the biggest mistake of your life." The silence that followed her outburst was deafening. Everyone was frozen, unsure of what to do. I could feel their eyes on me, the weight of the moment pressing down on my shoulders. Sophia's words echoed in my mind, but they didn't have the power they once did. They were just empty words, desperation disguised as truth. I looked at Alexander, expecting to see confusion, concern, maybe even pity, but when his eyes met mine, all I saw was unwavering trust. He didn't doubt me for a second. He didn't look at me like I was fragile, like I was about to break under the pressure. Instead, he turned toward Sophia, his gaze cool and composed, and for a moment, I could see the faintest flicker of disbelief in his eyes. Sophia was still standing there, breathing heavily, her eyes darting back and forth between us, hoping for some sign that this wasn't happening. She had always been able to manipulate everyone around her. She thought this moment would be her victory. She thought she had everyone fooled. But I wasn't fooled anymore. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, my heart beating fast but steady, my mind clear. I could feel the eyes of everyone on me, but I didn't let that affect me. I knew what I had to do. I reached into the pocket of my wedding dress and pulled out the letter I had prepared for this very moment. I unfolded it slowly, making sure every eye in the room was on me, every single person waiting for the next move. Sophia's eyes widened when she saw it. She must have known. She had to have known. The truth was coming, and there was no running from it. "Do you really think you can stop this?" I asked softly, my voice steady despite the chaos. "Do you really think that Alexander will look at you and see the person he wants to spend his life with? Do you think anyone here will believe your lies?" I paused for a moment, letting the weight of my words sink in. Sophia was trembling now, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Her plan, her carefully crafted story, was unraveling before her eyes, and I was going to make sure everyone saw it for what it truly was. "I've known what you've been doing, Sophia," I continued, my voice rising with a sense of power I hadn't known I possessed. "I know everything. Every word you wrote, every plan you made, every lie you told. And now it's time for you to face the truth. The truth that everyone here will hear, because it's not just your story anymore. It's mine. It always has been." With that, I began to read aloud, my voice echoing through the cathedral, each word heavy with the weight of years of betrayal, of jealousy, of manipulation. I read from the letter I had written, a letter filled with the darkest excerpts from Sophia's own diaries. Her words, her twisted thoughts, all laid bare for everyone to hear. "She believes she belongs with you," I read, looking straight at Sophia. "She thinks that by wearing a red dress and making a scene, she can take what I have. She thinks she can steal everything from me, but she's wrong." The gasps from the guests were audible, and I could see the shock on their faces as they slowly began to piece together what was happening. Sophia's mask, the one she had so carefully crafted for years, was falling apart. She had nothing left to hide behind. Her twisted obsession was now exposed to the world. I continued, reading the final diary entry aloud, the one where Sophia had so arrogantly written about how she planned to ruin my wedding, how she believed that by crashing it, she could take everything I had. "The red dress is perfect," I read. "It will make sure all eyes are on me. Eve thinks she's won, but she has no idea what's coming. By this time tomorrow, Alexander will finally be mine." Sophia's face drained of color as she heard her own words read aloud. Her expression twisted from triumph to horror in an instant. The room was silent now, every eye on her. And in that silence, she crumbled. The woman who had tried so hard to be the perfect sister, the perfect maid of honor, the perfect charmer, was nothing more than a broken girl with an obsession so deep it had consumed her. Her gaze darted frantically around the room, as if looking for an escape, but there was none. There was nowhere left for her to hide. She was exposed. All the lies, all the manipulation, it was all out in the open. Sophia took a step back, her breath quickening, her hands shaking, and then, as if unable to bear the weight of the truth, she turned and fled the church, her red dress trailing behind her like the remnants of a shattered illusion. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving nothing but the echoes of her departure. For a moment no one moved. The silence in the room was deafening. It was as if time had stopped, as if the world was holding its breath. And then, slowly, the tension began to dissolve. The guests began to stir, their whispers filling the air. But none of it mattered. What mattered was that it was over. The truth had been revealed, and I had won. I turned to Alexander, and he was already looking at me, his eyes filled with pride, with admiration. He reached for my hand, his grip strong and reassuring. Together we faced the officiant, and the ceremony continued. The vows we exchanged were no longer just words. They were promises forged in the fire of betrayal, of heartbreak, of truth. And in that moment, I knew that nothing could ever break us again. As we stood there, hand in hand, the cathedral now bathed in light, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The storm had passed. Sophia had done everything she could to tear us apart, but in the end, it was her own obsession that had destroyed her. And as we said our vows, as the ceremony moved forward, I knew one thing for certain. The life I had dreamed of, the love I had fought for, was finally mine. And no one could ever take it from me. The aftermath of the wedding was nothing like I had imagined. The morning after, I woke up beside Alexander, his arm around me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. The chaos, the tension, the fear of what might happen. It all seemed so distant now. All that mattered was that we had made it through, stronger and more united than ever. The storm had passed, and we were standing in the calm of its wake. But as the days went on, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Sophia's dramatic exit from the wedding was only the beginning of a much larger fallout. The social scene in Boston was buzzing with the news. Whispers spread faster than wildfire, and soon everyone knew about Sophia's obsession, her betrayal, her attempt to sabotage the most important day of my life. The guests who had been at the wedding, the reporters, even the bystanders who had heard the commotion, it all reached the public eye. What had been a private matter between Sophia and me was now something everyone had an opinion on. At first, I felt a sense of guilt. I had exposed Sophia in front of hundreds of people, her private thoughts and plans laid bare for the world to see. I knew it was the right thing to do, her actions had left me no choice, but still, a part of me wondered if there could have been another way. A way that didn't involve so much destruction. But as the days passed, as I saw how people began to rally around me, offering their support, their understanding, I realized that I had done what needed to be done. I had stood up for myself, for my future with Alexander, and I had done it with dignity. Sophia, on the other hand, was spiraling. The truth had crushed her. She had always been able to manipulate people into believing her version of the story, but now that her facade had crumbled, there was nowhere for her to hide. I couldn't deny that there was a small part of me that felt pity for her, but it didn't last long. What she had done wasn't something I could forgive easily, not after everything she had put me through. The days after the wedding were filled with calls and emails from mutual friends and family members, all asking if I was okay, all trying to understand what had driven Sophia to do what she did. I never had the answers to give them, not really. Sophia had always been unpredictable, always one step ahead of everyone, always playing the role of the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, the perfect friend. But the truth, the raw, ugly truth, was that she had never been happy. She had never been content with who she was. She had spent so long trying to be someone else, trying to step into my life, trying to steal what I had, that she had lost herself completely. The more I thought about it, the more I understood why she had done it. She didn't just want Alexander. She wanted everything I had. She wanted my life, my success, my happiness. And in her desperation to take it all, she had driven herself to the brink of madness. I couldn't help but wonder if it had always been this way. If, somewhere along the line, she had decided that the only way she could be happy was by destroying everything I had worked so hard to build. Alexander and I spent the first few weeks after the wedding trying to find our new rhythm. The wedding had been everything I had dreamed of and more, but the fallout had left its mark. Every time I opened my phone, I saw a new headline about Sophia. The media had a field day, portraying her as the jealous stepsister who tried to ruin the perfect wedding. The tabloids were ruthless, and I couldn't escape the constant stream of comments and articles about her obsession, about how she had tried to tear apart the life I had built. But through it all, Alexander remained by my side, his unwavering support a constant comfort. We both knew that Sophia would eventually have to face the consequences of her actions. The public humiliation, the shattered relationships. It wasn't something she could just walk away from. But the truth was, I had more pressing things to focus on. Alexander and I had talked about our future, about the life we wanted to build together, and I knew that the only thing that mattered now was us. Everything else, the drama, the gossip, the whispers, had to take a back seat. I wasn't going to let it consume me. The first step in moving forward was finding a new sense of purpose. Alexander and I had always been passionate about educational reform, about making a real difference in the world. We had talked about starting a foundation, about using our resources to help children in underserved communities, to give them the education and opportunities they deserved. We both felt strongly about it, and now, more than ever, it felt like the right time to take that step. As the weeks passed, I threw myself into the foundation, determined to make it a success. The pain of what had happened with Sophia was still there, lingering in the background, but it was no longer the focus of my life. My life was moving forward, and I wasn't going to let anything hold me back. The more we worked on the foundation, the more I realized that this was my true calling. Helping others, making a real difference. That was where my heart was. But while I was building my future, Sophia was falling apart. I didn't hear from her at first. She had gone into hiding, retreating from the public eye, unable to face the world after what had happened. It was clear that she wasn't handling things well. Her social media accounts, once filled with carefully curated images of a life she wanted everyone to envy, were now silent. Her friends, those who had once been so loyal to her, began to distance themselves. It was like she had become a shadow of the person she once was, someone who had no idea how to rebuild her life after everything she had lost. I heard from Olivia one afternoon, her voice filled with concern, as she told me that Sophia had checked into a therapy center. She was seeking help, finally acknowledging that she had lost control. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. Sophia's path to redemption, if it even existed, would be a long one. I couldn't imagine what it would take for her to truly change, but I knew that for the first time, she was facing the truth about herself. Whether or not she could rebuild her life, find peace, and heal was no longer in my hands. I had made my peace with the fact that she was no longer my responsibility. In the months that followed, I found myself becoming more and more immersed in the foundation. Alexander and I were stronger than ever, and I couldn't help but feel grateful for everything we had. Together, we were making a difference in the world, creating something meaningful that would outlast any of the drama that had once consumed my life. The foundation became my anchor, the thing that kept me focused and grounded. It was everything I had ever wanted, a chance to make a real difference, to leave behind a legacy that mattered. And through all of it, I realized something important. The most powerful transformation wasn't the one I had gone through. It was the transformation that Sophia had to face. The exposure, the humiliation, the loss. It had broken her. But in that breaking, there was the possibility of rebuilding. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about growth, about finding a way to move forward, to become someone better. I had always known that the greatest strength comes from within. It wasn't in the things we have or the people we know. It was in the ability to keep moving forward, no matter what life throws at you. And that's exactly what I did. So here I was, standing at the start of a new chapter in my life. Alexander and I were building something meaningful, something that would last. And for the first time in a long while, I knew that everything would be okay. The darkness of the past was behind me, and in its place was a future filled with possibility. And as for Sophia, I couldn't say where her journey would take her. But I knew one thing. Sometimes the greatest lesson we learn comes not from what we achieve, but from what we overcome. Months passed since the wedding, and though life had slowly returned to some semblance of normalcy for me, I couldn't help but think about Sophia. I had almost forgotten about the storm she had caused, the chaos that had unraveled our lives. But, in the quiet moments when I wasn't thinking about our foundation or Alexander, my mind would wander to her, to the person she had been and the person she was trying, unsuccessfully, to become. It was impossible to ignore the transformation that had begun. Word spread quickly that Sophia had checked into a therapy center, and while some of our mutual friends whispered about the irony of it all, there was no denying the significance of what was happening. She was finally admitting to herself the depth of her obsession, the destructive patterns she had been trapped in for years. It wasn't easy to accept, even for me, someone who had spent so long being manipulated by her. But I couldn't help but feel a flicker of something else. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the realization that this wasn't the end of her story, but rather, the beginning of a new one. I didn't hear from Sophia for a long time after she entered the center. Her absence from social media was complete. There were no more photos of perfect smiles or carefully staged moments. For the first time, she was anonymous. The world didn't know her anymore. No one was watching her every move. The image she had spent so many years cultivating had crumbled. And in its place, there was nothing. Nothing but the raw, unfiltered truth. And that truth was something I could never have imagined. I received a letter from her one afternoon, postmarked from a small town in the south of France. It was a simple, handwritten letter, the kind you never expect to receive from someone like her. She had always been so guarded, so careful with her words. But this time, there was no mask, just her in all her vulnerability. Eve, it began. I don't know how to begin or even if I should. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to say these things. I have spent so many years trying to be someone I wasn't, trying to take what wasn't mine, believing that if I could be you, have your life, everything would be better. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. I have hurt you in ways I can never take back. And for that, I am sorry. It felt like the world had stopped as I read her words. I could barely believe what I was seeing. For so long, Sophia had been a force of chaos, her presence a reminder of the damage she could cause. But here she was admitting it, admitting everything. The letter continued, her handwriting more shaky now, as if she was struggling to find the right words. I've spent so long pretending, Eve, pretending to be someone I'm not. I tried to destroy you because I thought that's what would make me whole. But I've realized now that nothing can make me whole except for me. I can't keep living in the shadows of other people's lives. I have to find my own way, my own path. For the first time in my life, I am trying to be real. I don't know if that's enough, but I have to try. I read those words over and over, feeling the weight of them pressing into my chest. Sophia had always been a master of manipulation, a puppet master pulling the strings, twisting everything to suit her needs. But now, she was unraveling, unmasking herself in a way that I never thought would happen. I had always wondered if she could change, if she could ever find peace within herself. And now it seemed like she was finally trying. Weeks passed, and the letter was only the beginning. Slowly but surely, Sophia began to rebuild her life, starting with small steps. She moved to the south of France, a place where no one knew her. There she started painting. She had always been good at it, sketching in the margins of her notebooks, creating vibrant images that only she could understand. Now, she was turning that quiet, personal passion into something more. She took a class in art therapy, something that seemed so far from the world she had once inhabited, the world of glamour and social climbing. She shared her journey with me through letters, each one more raw than the last. She described the moments of clarity, the breakthroughs, the pain of facing the truth of her actions. She wrote about her therapy sessions, how she was learning to forgive herself, how she was learning to let go of the need to compare herself to others. The Sophia I had known would never have let her guard down like this. But the Sophia that was emerging from the ashes of her past was different. She was, in a way, finding herself. It wasn't easy, I could tell. The darkness of her past still clung to her, like a shadow she couldn't shake. She would often write about the overwhelming guilt she felt, the shame that seemed to follow her wherever she went. But there was something else in her letters, something I hadn't expected, hope. Hope that she could become someone better, someone who didn't need to destroy others to feel important. One letter, in particular, stood out. Sophia had started her own small art therapy practice, working with children who had experienced trauma, helping them express their feelings through art. It was a humble beginning, but it was hers. It was real. It was the first time I had ever seen her do something purely for someone else, something that wasn't about her, about what she wanted to take. It was about giving. It was about healing. I'm not the same person I was, Eve, she wrote. I don't know if I'll ever be the person I was supposed to be, but I'm learning that it's okay to not have everything figured out. I'm learning that the only way forward is through honesty, through acceptance, through kindness. And for the first time in my life, I'm not trying to be you anymore. I'm trying to be me. Felt like the world had shifted once again. I had spent so many years hating her, resenting her, wishing she would disappear. But now, here she was, confronting her demons, seeking redemption. The same Sophia who had tried to destroy everything I held dear was now trying to rebuild her life from the ground up. I didn't know what the future held for her, or for me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. I had been angry for so long, holding on to the past and the hurt she had caused. But now, I saw her for what she was. A broken, flawed person who was trying to find her way. And maybe, just maybe, she could. Maybe we both could. Sophia's journey was far from over. But I had come to realize that redemption wasn't something I could give her. It was something she had to find for herself. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo what had been done. But I could let go. I could forgive even if it was just in my heart, for the sake of my own peace. The last letter I received from Sophia wasn't filled with apologies or explanations. It was simply an invitation. "I've made something for you," she wrote. "A painting. A symbol of everything we've been through, of everything we are now. I hope you'll come to see it. It's not for you to forgive me. It's for me to forgive myself." And so I went to the little gallery she had opened in a quiet corner of the world. There, I saw her work, her growth, her soul laid bare in every brushstroke. She was no longer the woman who tried to destroy my life. She was the woman who was finally learning to live her own. The painting hung in the center of the room, a beautiful, chaotic swirl of colors, a representation of the past and the future, intertwined. It wasn't perfect. It didn't have to be. Neither of us were perfect. But it was a start to something new. And in that moment, standing in front of the canvas she had created, I realized that redemption wasn't just for her. It was for both of us. As the months went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that the tides had shifted, not just for Sophia, but for me as well. The chaos of the wedding, the painful unraveling of everything I had once known, had somehow given way to something unexpected. A future full of possibilities. What had seemed like the end of the story was actually only the beginning. And just as Sophia had found her path toward healing, I, too, had found a way to move forward, to create something meaningful out of the wreckage of the past. Alexander and I had always talked about our shared passion for education, for helping those who hadn't been given the same opportunities we had. But now, more than ever, that dream seemed like the only thing that truly mattered. With everything that had happened, I knew that we had the power to do something bigger, something that could make a lasting impact on the world. And so we launched the foundation, a project that had been in the works for months, but which now felt more urgent, more vital than ever before. The focus of our work was clear. We wanted to provide educational opportunities for underserved children, to give them a chance at a better future, just as we had been given one. But as we delved deeper into our plans, it became evident that there was something else, something more profound that was taking shape. We weren't just creating a charity, we were building a legacy of compassion, of understanding, of bridging the gap between privilege and hardship, and of making sure that the next generation would have the tools they needed to change the world. And it was in the midst of this endeavor that something even more surprising happened. Sophia, in her own way, reached out to me. It wasn't an apology, not directly, but it was something that felt just as important. She had seen the work we were doing, the impact we were beginning to make, and she reached out, not to ask for forgiveness, but to offer something of her own. I remember the first time I saw her since that fateful day at the wedding. It was a quiet lunch in a small cafe, a place where no one knew us, no one cared about the past. Sophia was sitting across from me, her demeanor calmer, more grounded than I had ever seen her. There was no longer that air of competition, of trying to prove something. Instead, there was a quiet humility, a vulnerability that I hadn't expected. She didn't speak at first. She just watched me for a moment, as if trying to find the right words, as if wondering where we could possibly begin. And then, with a soft breath, she spoke. "I've been watching everything you're doing with the foundation," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I never thought I'd see you do something like this. I never thought you could turn everything you went through into something so powerful, so beautiful. I didn't know what to say at first. There had been so much pain between us, so much betrayal. But as I sat there, looking at the woman who had once been my rival, I realized something. Sophia was no longer the person I had fought so hard to protect myself from. She had changed. She was still imperfect, still working through the wreckage of her past, but she was trying. She was learning just as I had. And perhaps just as I had found my way forward, she had found hers. I never expected this either, I replied, my voice a little shaky, the emotions catching me off guard. But I think we're both finding our way, in different ways. But it's our way. She nodded, the hint of a smile on her lips. I want to help. I want to be a part of this, what you're building. I know I don't deserve your trust, and I know I've made so many mistakes, but I need to do something that matters. Something that can help others like you've helped me. In that moment, I realized that we were no longer defined by the mistakes of the past. We were no longer bound by the chains of our old rivalry, our old competition. We were free. Free to become the people we were meant to be, free to build something meaningful together. And so we began to work together. At first, it was small, just a few meetings brainstorming ideas for how we could merge our efforts. Sophia, with her newfound passion for art therapy, suggested that we incorporate creative expression into the work we were doing with the children in our foundation. Art, she explained, had the power to heal, to allow kids to express emotions they didn't even know how to name. She had been through the process herself, learning to face her own darkness, to express what was hidden in her soul. And now, she wanted to share that with others. It was a perfect fit. Our educational initiatives were already centered around providing tools for kids to succeed academically. But now, with Sophia's expertise, we were able to add a new layer. Emotional support, healing through creativity, through art. And with that, our foundation expanded into something even more profound. A place where children could not only learn but also heal. Where they could build confidence and self-worth through both education and creative expression. The work was slow at first, the logistics tricky. But soon we began to see the results. The kids were thriving, not just in the classroom, but in their own hearts. They were opening up, finding new ways to communicate, to express their feelings, to face their fears. Sophia's art therapy sessions became a cornerstone of the foundation, and the change was palpable. It wasn't just about education anymore. It was about empowerment. It was about creating a safe space where children could not only learn but grow, emotionally, creatively, and intellectually. As we continued to work together, I began to see just how far Sophia had come. She wasn't the same woman who had tried to tear my life apart. She was someone different. Someone who was making amends, who was giving back, who was using her talents and her story to help others. She wasn't just seeking redemption anymore. She was living it, day by day, with every child she helped, with every painting she created, with every conversation she had. And with each passing day, I could feel my own heart shifting. I had spent so many years angry at her, so many years holding on to the past, but now, I saw her not as my enemy, but as my partner. We had both been broken by the past, but together we were building something new, something that mattered, something bigger than either of us could have ever achieved alone. The foundation flourished, becoming a beacon of hope and change in the community. Children from all walks of life came to our programs, finding support, education, and love in ways they had never known before. And Sophia, once consumed by her jealousy and obsession, had become a true force for good, a woman who had found her purpose in helping others find theirs. It wasn't perfect. It was never going to be, but that was the beauty of it. We weren't perfect, but together we were changing lives. And for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. The past no longer held me captive. The future, with its promise of growth, of healing, of shared success, was finally ours to shape. As I stood on the balcony that evening, the warm breeze brushing against my face, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had brought me to this moment. The journey had been long, filled with pain, betrayal, and countless moments of doubt. But now, in the quiet of the present, I realized that it had all led me here, to this new chapter, to a place of peace, of understanding, and of growth. I had spent so many years defining myself by the people around me, by the expectations others had of me. I had fought for my happiness, my identity, my place in the world. And in the process, I had learned more than I could have ever imagined. I had learned that happiness isn't something that can be stolen or taken. It's something you create for yourself, no matter the obstacles that come your way. And in doing so, I had found my strength. I had found my voice. And in the most unexpected way, Sophia had found hers, too. What once seemed like a rivalry, a battle for everything I held dear, had transformed into something I could never have anticipated. We had both been broken by our pasts, by our insecurities, by our fears. But instead of letting those things tear us apart, we had allowed them to bring us together. Together, we had created something that mattered, something real. Not just a foundation or a mission, but a new life, a new way of being. Our work in the foundation had become our shared purpose. Every day, we saw the lives we were changing, the children whose futures we were helping to shape. It wasn't just about the academics anymore. It was about healing, about teaching these kids that their worth didn't depend on the expectations others had of them. It was about showing them that they had the power to write their own stories, to define their own paths. As I looked over at Alexander, standing beside me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder, I realized that this new chapter wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about Sophia or our foundation. It was about all of us, about the future we were building together. The love we had fought for, the dreams we had worked toward, were finally becoming a reality. And I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. The foundation was thriving, and as we reached more and more children, our mission continued to expand. It wasn't easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. But every challenge we faced only made us stronger, more united. Alexander and I were no longer just partners in business. We were partners in life. And Sophia, once my greatest adversary, had become an ally. She had found her place, her purpose. And in helping others find their own, she had healed herself in ways I hadn't thought possible. The past no longer had a hold on us. The hurt, the betrayal, the anger. It had all been washed away by the work we were doing, by the lives we were touching, by the love we were giving. And in the process, we had all transformed. What had once been a story of rivalry and resentment had turned into one of redemption and renewal. As the sun began to set, casting its golden glow over the city, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. I had spent so much time fighting, so much time trying to control the outcome of my life. But now, I understood that life had its own way of unfolding, and that sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones that you never see coming. We weren't perfect. We never would be. But we had each other. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that everything was exactly as it should be. We had survived the storm. We had weathered the worst of it. And now we were ready to embrace the future, whatever it may bring. So, as I took Alexander's hand and turned to face the horizon, I felt the weight of the past lift from my shoulders. This was a new chapter, and it was ours to write. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about living, truly living. The best part? We were just getting started.